You're listening to Safer Travel Talk, the podcast to inform, inspire and provide insight into the world of travel.
So hi and welcome to another episode of Safer Travel Talk. Today we're welcoming Emily Pickard from York Mumbler, and we're going to talk a little bit about family travel, a little bit about what's going on in her world and how travel's evolving and what's going on. So hi Emily.
Hello, hi, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Do you just want to talk a little bit about what you do and your background and what York Mumbler does?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Emily. I live here in York and I run York Mumbler, which is a parenting website essentially, but very much community based is where we started. So I have two children of my own who are 9 and 6 now. But when I was pregnant with my eldest daughter, nearly 10 years ago, I felt this need to go and find a community of people, or just some friends really who had children, because most of my friends didn't have children at that time. And so I set up York Mumbler as a Facebook group with the idea of it really being a kind of coffee morning, or just a way to get together with other parents, share ideas, find the best places to go and get cake and coffee and things like that with your baby. And it's grown from there. So now York Mumbler is a website. I found that on the Facebook group, we had about 1,000 members within the first year actually on the Facebook group. And I found that there was some really, really rich, fantastic information that was really useful to parents, but it was getting lost. So we set up the website to house that information on a bit more of a permanent basis, really, from, classes and play groups that we're on to, like I say, places to eat out, days out, attractions, activities, things going on in the school holidays. So that is now all housed on the website. Last month we got 50,000 hits to the website, so it's incredibly well used with parents in York. And then also we do, the majority of it is about things happening in York, and it's useful for people who live here, but also for visitors to York as well, are discovering it and finding it useful. And we do also have a little section on there all about holidays, because we did find that, mainly pre-COVID, to be honest, but lots of questions about where are the best places to go with families and tips and things like that people were looking for. So that is a sort of smaller area of the website, but still one that's sort of really well used and well used in the in the group as well. People ask for advice.
So is there, so people coming to York as well, you're sort of mentioning. So I presume that people in York are quite well aware of the safety aspects, sort of the main things like the river and the sort of going out in the evening and all that kind of thing. But as you're, York resident, York local, really plugged into the community, what would you say for people visiting York? How would you say for them to approach maybe coming into the city, what things to be aware of, and certainly what are the cool things to do as well as the safety stuff?
Yeah, I think, on the grand scale of places to visit, York feels like a relatively safe place. We obviously do have a river, as you pointed out, and I think that's something to be aware of. Some of the best cities in the world have rivers running through them, but obviously, there is a very strong current in that river, and we know in York about, unfortunately, there are people that lose their lives in that river every year still, York residents and, visitors. So always be very, very careful near water. That's something to be aware of. I think other than that, York is a relatively safe place. It's obviously very old city. So I know that, the council does everything they can to make things accessible and things like that. But we have some city walls, for example, that go round York, which are an amazing free thing to do for families. And certainly any areas that are of danger, they've put railings up and things. But, it hasn't been built, this year. It's been built, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I suppose there's things to consider that is just, health and safety is today is much better than it used to be in Viking times and Roman times. So there's general things like that. But I think overall York is a pretty friendly place to visit. Obviously, there's a ton of great things to do in York for families. There are some really great safe areas for families. So the thing that I'm always conscious of is traffic. With very young children. I think the great thing is the city centre is broadly free of traffic in the daytimes. So that's pretty safe, sort of within the city walls. And then there's pockets that you can go and visit that really are free, that you can let your children run free. For example, Museum Gardens is a brilliant place to go and visit with families. So that's a sort of the gardens in the city centre. And they've got places where children can really run free, and they've got, you know, a museum there as well, which is fantastic to visit. There's also Dean's Park, which is just behind the Minster, which is not as well known actually, but is a wonderful place right in the heart of the city centre, which is great to let kids roam free. I am working with York Council actually to try and help get more safe spaces for children in the city centre to sort of play and to have a bit more fun in the city centre. But we have got a couple already, which are well worth visiting if you're coming to York.
No, great. I mean, I love the city. I'm originally from York myself, so it's a great place. I found my appreciation for the city certainly grew after I'd been travelling and come back. You know, so each time you come back, you go, oh, well, actually, this is a wonderful city. Oh, well, actually, I like this bit and I like that bit. So if we talk about travelling with a family and sort of coming to get out of the house. I mean, I don't have children at the moment. I mean, whether we do or not in the future is another question. But I hear some friends and people that I know that have got young children or slightly older children that it takes a long time to get out of the house. It takes a long time. You have to leave extra time to do this and that and the other. Can you just explain sort of how that works if you're going out for a day trip somewhere, or if you're, you know, we will get onto holidays and sort of that, you know, going abroad further down the line, but just sort of day trips and keeping kids occupied and all the things that you have to consider that maybe certainly someone of my demographic wouldn't.
Yeah, it's funny you say actually, because this was when we first, you know, had our first baby, it was something that we were so aware of, just getting out of the house, how difficult it was. In fact, I had my 30th birthday the week after I had my first child, and stupidly thought it would be a great idea to still go ahead with a bit of a party for my 30th when I had a 1-week-old baby. I don't know why I thought this would work. And just getting out the house was a disaster. I think it's the first time we'd actually gone somewhere since we'd had our baby. And we somehow managed to get out of the house. The baby was, you know, Edith was in the car, and we managed to lock the car, I'm not sure how, and then leave the keys inside our house, and lock the house. So the baby was locked in the car, the keys were locked in the house, and we were stood outside not being able to get into either. This is the kind of logistics that your brain just doesn't quite work sometimes after you've had a baby. We managed to smash a window in the house, got the keys and got her out safely, so all was well in the end. But yeah, it wasn't without its drama. So that's probably quite an extreme example. But yeah, there's just lots to think about when you've got children taken out, because you want to make sure that they've got the right clothes, and we know the weather can change quite quickly in the UK, so it could be, you know, beautifully sunny one minute, and then you need, you know, raincoats or gloves and scarves the next. So clothes is a big thing, just to make sure they're sort of suitably dressed, and footwear and all that kind of stuff, with spares in your bag. You know, depending on the age of your children, accidents happen, so, you know, often when they're little you need to take spare clothes out. That's one element. Food, you know, snacks are essential when you've got children, to try and stave off any hangriness that they might have. So yeah, snacks, and then things to just keep them occupied. It depends how long your journey is, really. But even for a short day trip out, if you're getting the bus or even in the car, you know, they often need little things to play with. And, you know, and when they're older and on longer journeys, thank goodness for iPads and the equivalents, is all I can say, when you can put a film on and things like that in the car, if you're going on a bit of a further trip. So yeah, it can take a while to get out the house. It's something now that I don't think about that much, because, you know, my children are 6 and 9. It still takes ages to get out of the house, but it's just part of our lives now. But I remember it was quite a shock to the system when they were little.
No, I can imagine. Look, so I talk about travel and going abroad and doing, you know, various holidays, gap years and all of this. And we meet a community of like-minded people. And it's, you know, it's common interest. So if we end up in the mountains, then you'll meet people who like snowboarding and skiing. The beaches, you like people who like, you know, hanging out on the beaches or whatever. And I'm presuming that it's similar with families. As soon as you've got kids, you're part of this club or part of this community.
Yeah.
Is there little bits you can sort of talk about around there? There's the sort of benefits and the help that's provided.
Yeah, I mean, that is what Mumbler is all about, is about community and bringing families together. That is, that was the original reason it started, was to create a community for myself of parents. And that is absolutely what we're all about. And in Mumbler, we actually have this thing called the Mumbler Hood. I'm actually wearing the badge now. I don't know if you can see. It's a little heart and hand, which is all about supporting each other and being kind to each other. And, parenting, it can be tough. There's not a parent I know that hasn't certainly had the odd day, if not for long periods of time, where they found it really, really tough. And community just is everything in those situations, whether you're traveling or, when I went to university and met a group of friends, being able to being in it together just helps ease it a lot. So you don't feel alone on any element of parenting or whatever it is that you're doing. So yeah, it's all about the community. We've created this Mumbler Hood and we give out these badges on Mumbler to sort of for people to wear, and it's a subtle thing. The idea is that if you see someone wearing this badge, you know that they're kind of in the club with you. It's a subtle thing to say you're not alone. If you're having a bad day, you can approach someone wearing this badge and you know that they're a local parent who've probably gone through the same things that you're going through at some stage. And it's supposed to be a friendly face. So we're trying to create that. We very much have a community online, but I want to sort of bring that out into the public and onto the streets of York so that people know they're not alone.
No, wonderful idea, wonderful. So if we talk about the benefits of travel, I talk about a lot for sort of gap year students and people going abroad. But what would you say are the benefits of traveling with your kids or going for days out? Is there a bonding sort of exercise or? Because I certainly know from when I traveled with my parents a lot, when I was very young, I don't remember a lot of those experiences now, but obviously when you get slightly older, you do. And it's sort of interesting how that bond will kind of last and those memories go through.
Yeah, I mean, just, any experiences you can give your children, from a young age are good ones. And, I don't think it matters if that is, a holiday to Mauritius, which would be wonderful, or if it's just going camping somewhere locally, or just getting away as a family for the day somewhere, going to the beach for the day. I think creating those experiences and giving your children different experiences, it just shows them what's out there and what the possibilities for them are in the world, which I was very fortunate that when we were growing up, we did get to go on holiday a fair bit. We used to go to the same place in Spain every year, actually, and it almost became a bit of a second home to our family, and we got to know the families over there as well. So I felt incredibly comfortable in, northern Spain and Catalonia, where we used to go. So much so, actually, that's where my husband and I got married 12 years ago. It's on that beach in Spain where I used to play as a child every year. And it was just, it felt like we knew another family out there. Well, we did. We do know another family out there. They're our friends. And also it went into then when we grew up and we were teenagers and young adults going out traveling the world. My sister and my brother actually both worked out in Spain with the family that we got to know when we were growing up. And I think having a connection in a city, when you do, as a late teen or young adult, you want to go and explore the world. But I now look at that from my parents' point of view and think how wonderful it was that they could do that within the safety of knowing someone that was close by and sort of having that trust close by. And that's something that we've actually started with our children. So my husband actually lived in Vienna for 7 years in his 20s. And he has got a great group of friends out there. Still, and obviously we now live here in York, but we have obviously gone to see each other very regularly, and our children have been out to Vienna I think 2 or 3 times in their lives, but very much as a kind of feeling of staying with friends and family. And actually a friend of ours who lives in Vienna, her teenage daughter has come to stay with us twice now for the summer, for a couple of weeks over the summer. Which obviously she's only, I think she's about 15 now. She wouldn't be able to do that by herself at 15. Obviously that's far too young to go out by yourself, but to come and stay with a family who you know and trust and have built up those sort of international connections, if you like, over our years is I think, invaluable. And, you know, when our daughters want to and when they're old enough, we'll certainly be asking for that favour back so she can go and stay with them in Vienna as well.
Definitely. I mean, so you're conscious with your kids that you're bringing them up to automatically operate in an international environment.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done so much in the last year or two, obviously, with COVID, but very much so, yeah. In fact, my daughter's godfather still lives in Vienna now. He's actually from New Zealand, so I guess we're quite fortunate that we have a lot of friends who are from different countries and different cities. Like I say, my husband's lived in a different city for a number of years in Austria. So yeah, it's something that I must admit, when I was growing up, I always thought I'd like to marry someone from a different country because I'd love my children to be bilingual, which I didn't do. But my husband actually does speak German really well and has friends out there. So yeah, I just think it's one of life's rich experiences, being able to travel, you know, travel the world. But as a parent, to be able to do that safely, yeah, I want my kids to be able to travel the world, but even better if I know someone in the country that they're going to.
Yeah, well, definitely. Yeah, it's a nice starting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you be confident letting your children, when they get to the right time and they get to the right age, would you be confident letting them go off and do a gap year or a winter season or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know if confidence the right word, but I would have to just swallow my fear and let them, I think, because I think, you know, I did a little bit myself. I went out to Thailand after I finished university. Like I say, my husband lived abroad. I've got a number of friends who've done ski seasons. My sister went interrailing around Europe, and what they gained from those experiences, I wouldn't want to hold that back from my children. I think, you know, it's so valuable to get an experience of the world. So yeah, I'd be nervous. I'd be worried about it, of course. I think all parents probably would be, but I think it's kind of a rite of passage if they can do it, and I think it's an enriching experience if they can. So yeah, I do kind of think as well, it's, you know, by the time they get older, obviously there's organizations like yours which are all about, you know, raising awareness of how to do it safely, and hopefully that's what we would do. And, you know, hopefully we've brought them up as children, even now at the ages they're at now, to be aware of sort of dangers and risks in life. But I think you also can't wrap your children up in cotton wool, and you've got to allow them to experience the world. Otherwise they're missing out, you know.
Oh no, I think it's a hugely rewarding thing. I mean, it's a different perspective, I think, when you've got children. You know, it was only a few years ago really that I started to consider what my parents thought about me going abroad, because, you know, I'm me, I'm here, I'm safe wherever I go, and, you know, obviously with the charity things are a bit different, but it's an interesting point that you get to where you start to consider, oh well, my parents must have been quite worried.
Yeah,
I mean, we have looked at this, and the community of keeping in touch with people, the social media, you know, you can keep tabs on people, have people check in at various times, traveling with people, with friends and with communities, as you say. So I think there's a lot more support out there than there used to be, certainly when I went traveling and did a gap year. But I think it's such a rewarding experience to go off and explore the world, and I'm so pleased that you're an advocate for that as a parent, as certainly my parents were. So
and I'm trying to sort of teach my girls that this isn't just about traveling. This is about, you know, life, because we know, unfortunately, there can be dangers on your doorstep as much as there can be, you know, at the other side of the world. And so the thing that I'm trying to instill into my girls, or trying to help teach them, and I'm learning it myself as well, is trusting your intuition. And I think that has got to be, I think, and you'll probably know as well, one of the most important things is that if something doesn't feel right, it's probably not, you know, and you've got to know what that intuition. I think I really only tuned into my intuition after having children, really, or that's the only time I was really conscious of it or aware of it, is that I did feel, you know, in tune with myself after I'd had children. But if I can sort of try and it's a hard thing to kind of explain to children, but I always talk about that feeling in your tummy, and if it feels right, you know, it probably is. And I think that's the kind of thing that hopefully that when they're traveling, you know, won't necessarily completely keep them safe, but I think it could go a long way to keeping them safe, is that don't put yourself in situations that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So someone once told me a story, actually. I know when I was growing, if you go to a friend's house for a party, for example, or if you're staying overnight at a friend's house, I know I was a child of the 80s, and it was probably a bit more like, don't call your parents unless unless there's a blue light ambulance coming, or, it's a bit stiff upper lip in those times, and it was a bit more put up with it. Whereas someone told me once that they would pick their child up, they'd say to their children before they go to a friend's house, if you feel sad or if you want to come home or if you feel uncomfortable, call me and I'll come and get you. There was no sort of be tough kind of messaging. It was like, I'll come and get you. And they said, and that's because in the future, if they're in a situation where they feel uncomfortable, I want them to always know they can call me and we'll help them and we'll sort it out. So again, little things that are maybe small at age 6 or age 9, but that I hope will be lessons that will stay with them, and they always know they can call if they're in a sticky situation, and to trust their intuition.
No, it's certainly something that I completely agree with, that we teach as well, where you can learn all the risk assessments, the awareness strategies, what to do, but there's 2 points that kind of I push home as well, which is listen to yourself, listen to that feeling within inside you, and secondly, to have the confidence to act upon it. Because, and if that's instilled from, as you say, growing up, and the confidence to phone my mum no matter what your friends think, it's the same thing when you're traveling, because I know that peer pressure is, when you're traveling in a group, you don't want to let people down, you don't want to do these sort of things. So that confidence is huge when you're traveling to sort of say, right, no, it doesn't feel right to me, I'm going, I'll catch up with you later, or to make a shift. And it can be something very simple like crossing the road, because simple can defuse a situation.
Yeah.
And so we touched upon it briefly, but the COVID aspect is obviously something that's really devastated the travel industry, and certainly people's confidence, I think, in travel and visiting a different country. How does that play out in a family dynamic? Are your community, are they more likely to travel in the UK, or have they got the confidence to go abroad because it's not themselves? I know the children or the younger ones probably haven't been vaccinated, and this kind of thing. So how does that sit with you and with people within your community?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real mixture, to be honest, in the community. For me personally, we haven't been abroad this year, and we don't actually plan to travel as a family abroad next year. At the moment, having said that, my husband and I have sort of started to get that itch of, come on, we could do with getting away. So we might go out to Vienna to see some friends out there at some point with the girls. From my perspective, I don't feel particularly nervous about it from the kind of COVID point of view. I think, to be honest, the thing that's really stopped us traveling so far is the hassle factor. Just knowing, there are a lot more hoops to jump through at the moment. So I've just thought, for the hassle versus the benefit, I'm not sure yet it's been worth it. Having said that, I've got a few friends who have been abroad recently, and I've been looking at their pictures with envy, just saying, I do really miss this, actually. Maybe the benefit and the payoff is going to be worth a bit of hassle. And actually reports of it hasn't been too bad to travel, in terms of extra paperwork and all that kind of stuff that you've got to fill in. It's not been as bad as they thought. So from a personal perspective, we haven't yet got an abroad holiday booked. Apart from myself, it's my 40th next year, so I'm actually going away with a few friends next year for my 40th for a few days. So that'll be fun. In terms of the community, it is really, really mixed. There's definitely been, I think it's actually been a great benefit that there's been a lot more UK holidays. We're fortunate enough to live in an amazing place of the world, whether that's in England or obviously Scotland and Wales are pretty easy to get to as well. We love holidaying in Anglesey. I was there not too long ago, and we have got plans to go to Scotland as well, and we've had just a few more holidays in the UK. We've bought a really good tent this year, and a kind of van that converts in. It's not a camper van, but you kind of use it that way to go camping. So we've made the most of that, and I know a lot of families have. I mean, if you try to get an Airbnb booking or anything in the UK, it's getting a bit better now, but I know it has been tough. And it is mixed. Some people just live for their holidays abroad and need the sun, and therefore have decided it's worth it for them. And some are staying well clear for now. It's a real mixed bag in the group.
Interesting. So you mentioned Airbnb and that kind of, would that be a common holiday where you're doing with kids, you're doing self-catering as opposed to, you know, sort of all-inclusive or sort of half-board holidays? Would that be a preference for traveling with a family?
Again, it's a mixture. A friend of mine recently went on an amazing all-inclusive with the family holiday clubs, and, you know, everything included. It looked phenomenal. We have tended to do, I don't know whether it's because we did like traveling before we had children. I've always been quite a fan of self-catering and Airbnbs. I quite like that feeling of kind of the home from home. I haven't personally been on one of the all-inclusives, but they do have an appeal, definitely. So maybe at some point we will. But yeah, mixed bag. I think it, you know, like parents are individuals just the same as people without children are individuals. So it's horses for courses. People like different things. But yeah, we've definitely, in fact, the last time we stayed in Vienna was at an Airbnb and it was fantastic.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. So let's touch on traveling abroad with kids, because, you know, certainly, and not being horrible, but when you see, you know, children on a flight and they're crying, and, you know, I mean, the parents, you know, the sound is, they're used to that sound, but for someone who doesn't have kids,
it's a pain.
It can be, yes. And I'll leave it at that. But just how is it when you're traveling on long journeys or abroad? Have you got any tips and advice on that kind of area of how we can travel with making it no disruption for other passengers or minimal disruption?
It's funny, actually, because you're right that parents kind of get used to the sound of their own child crying. However, someone else's child crying does still have that, like, that factor of it's not your child. I don't know, there must be something like caveman about it, that your own child crying, it doesn't quite feel the same disruption as someone else's. But when I hear someone else's child crying on a plane, I have two feelings. One, it's slightly irritating, but my main one is, thank God it's not my child. Because I just feel for that parent, because you've been in that situation yourself. All you want to do is sort of soothe your child. You're very aware of how annoying it is to everyone else. And it's, you know, and I remember before I had children thinking, can't you just do something? You know, can't you comfort your child? Can't you do the X, Y, and Z? And sometimes you can, but quite often you just can't. And I know that's sort of hard to sort of explain or understand, that parent's probably trying their best to do it, but they can't. Sometimes children are just grumpy, probably like adults are, but they just express themselves more. So yeah, in terms of what you can do, we were lucky enough actually to go to America just before lockdown, because my cousin got married, well, lives there, and therefore got married out there. So we had a fairly long haul flight with my children aged, well, they'd have been 4 and 6 at the time. So it can be quite a tricky age. So what the tip that I was given and that we did was to just go and get a little bag of sort of, if I say gifts, it makes it sound like more than it was, but little things that the children just haven't, it's not toys from home. You know, you can go somewhere relatively cheap, like a Poundland or you know, somewhere fairly cheap, and just get a few new little toys for the kids, and colouring books and stuff that they haven't seen before. I didn't actually go to this extent, but other people have said that they go to the extent of wrapping them up so it feels like a real treat, and you don't give them all at once. You wait until they get a bit, you know, annoyed or grumpy, and then you bring out a little present and they can colour in, or they can, you know, it's got that kind of novelty factor. So a couple of little gifts goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be expensive. But the thing I have learned as a parent is don't do anything until you need to. So the temptation is to sort of give them going, you know, this is your holiday pack, you know, exciting and fun, but actually don't bother until they start getting a bit grumpy, and then it can be a way to diffuse it. Snacks is the biggest tip, you know, just and they can be healthy things. We sort of try and stick to healthier things rather than the sugary things, because the sugary things might help them have an instant, you know, happiness, but then you get the come down from that as well. So when we're traveling abroad, you can, you know, get some really good healthy snacks these days, on or dried fruit and that kind of stuff that feels like sweets, but it's not quite as sugary. But yeah, snacks are definitely a good way, and gifts, and some of the old school games, I Spy and things like that. We play things like the alphabet game, where in fact we play this around the dinner table, where you've got to choose a theme. So we had Harry Potter last night as the theme, and then you go through the alphabet and you've got to think of something that beginning with A in Harry Potter or B in Harry Potter. And you can do that for endless things, foods or countries, or if you're going to Spain, so the thing can be Spain, and think of things associated with that. So there are loads of games that you can look up. We've got a few on the website, but I would just say go to Pinterest or Google and look up some of those and have them in your back pocket, ready for the times when the kids get a bit fed up.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, they're great. It sound quite difficult, the alphabet game, to be honest. I was just trying to think.
Hard. The Harry Potter one was hard.
I bet it was.
Depends on the age of your children. Food's quite easy. A for apple, B for banana. That's easy.
Yeah. So what do you think the benefits for are there any advice for the actual parents when you're traveling as a family? Because there's all these techniques for the kids and to keep them happy and to make sure they're having a great time. And I'm presuming that you pick locations where, they, like you were saying about York, you'd go to the museum gardens where they can run free. Do you think it's the same for parents, or that you would choose your destinations with the priority being the kids rather than yourselves, or where's the benefit for you as a parent?
Yeah, I think as a parent, the benefit to the children, the benefit to you are often very interlinked. And as I say, all parents are different. So I do think it's important as a parent to go on a holiday that you will enjoy. Parents need the holiday as much as the children. So it completely depends. But that's why we take our kids to Vienna, is because we want to go and see our friends there. And yes, of course, we'll adapt it. We're not going to the nightclubs of Vienna with our children. We'll go more to the daytime, the Christmas markets and things like that. Are wonderful with the kids. So we're not doing exactly what we would do without children, but we're still going to the places that we want to visit and seeing the people we want to see. And kids exist in most places, as far as I'm aware. So most places you go to are going to have some element of child friendly, whatever child friendliness that is for that culture in that city. I think that's something you can learn. So I'd say to the parents, go where you want to go. If you want to experience something, or if you just need a holiday, then book yourself that all-inclusive, get the kids in the holiday club. They'll have a fantastic time and you have a break. I think it's really important to book, what the parents want as well. But what you want does change when you have children, but you're not a different person. Make sure that you are getting what you need from your holiday, because you need it.
yeah, of course. So that leads on to kind of, when your kids go out of sight, so they have gone off to the holiday club for a few hours, or they've gone somewhere. How does that affect you as a parent? Can you relax, or is that something you learn over time? Or
yeah, I think the older your children get, or this is my experience anyway, the older my children are, the more I can relax. I couldn't have comprehended, up until the age of 1, sending them off to a holiday club or anything like that, or even leaving them. I remember a friend of mine got married abroad in Italy when I found out about the wedding just after my daughter was born, but the wedding was actually, I think she was 9 months old when the wedding actually happened, but there was no children invited to the wedding. So I had to make that decision of whether I go to this wedding abroad in Italy without my 9-month-old daughter or not. And it really tore me apart, that decision. I found it incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I spoke to my mum about it at the time, and I just said, it's one of my best friend's weddings, but I've got this baby. And she said to me, look, I think a good thing to remember is your baby and your child is always the most important thing to you in the world. But remember, they're not the only important thing to you, and that friendships matter. And when your children grow up and need you less and less and less, then your friendships are still there. And she said, you've got to do what's right for you. And if it's not right going, then your friend will understand. And she absolutely would have understood. But I did make that decision to go, but my husband stayed at home with our daughter. So I wasn't leaving her sort of with a stranger, I don't think I could have done that, or even left her with grandparents at that stage. But knowing I was leaving her with a dad, I could. And I literally flew in, went to the wedding, I think I stayed one night and then flew back home. And I'm so, so glad I did, actually. It was hard at the time. I can't say I didn't enjoy moments of it, though. You know, being able to actually read a book for the first time in a year or 9 months certainly was really, really nice. And that feeling of getting, you know, an experience with my friends without having to constantly think about, you know, the baby at the time was nice. And I'm glad I did it in hindsight, but that was tough. I think now my kids are older. We have had a few weekends away without them. We haven't, I'm trying to think if we've actually put them in holiday clubs on holiday. Like I say, we haven't done the all-inclusive thing yet, but I absolutely would put them in a holiday club because they would love that now. So I'd say if there's anyone out there with, you know, very young babies and you can't kind of comprehend leaving them, at some point you will, but do it at the time that's right for you, you know. There's no point in doing it if you're not going to enjoy it yourself either. But yeah, I can now absolutely enjoy time when my kids aren't there. I know that they'll be having fun as well.
No, definitely. So, you know, what advice would you have for, you know, say parents who would say you're traveling as a family? So a few tips for just the parents who, you know, they're going away for maybe the first few times with the kids. What should they make sure they do or make sure they don't do when they're traveling? And what would be the tips that you would tell your children? Because obviously your children are old enough to have a proper conversation, to know their own mind and what they'd like. What advice do you give them to sort of stay safe or to watch out for? And the same for kind of parents.
Yeah. For parents, on a general tip to parents, I would probably say less is more. Try to not cram too much into your holidays, you know, particularly if it's something that, you know, if it's one of your first holidays with children. I remember I used to try and do all the things that we did pre-children in the holidays. And that just made it really stressful. And holidays aren't supposed to be about being stressed. You know, it's not about cramming as many experiences as you can into it. I think, you know, allow breathing space, allow some days where you're not planning things and not doing things. And that, because I think it's when you do get stressed, you know, if you've got children, you're trying to do too much. And I'm saying this and laughing to myself because I definitely didn't have this message to myself within the first few years of having children. I used to do loads of stuff, cram loads in. But I find that less is more, and children will make their own fun and make their own, you know, have a good time on holiday and if you're relaxed. So kind of less is more. In terms of any safety aspects, I mean, I'm no expert on it, but I would just say probably back to that intuition thing. Just trust your intuition. If something doesn't feel right, you know, try and be aware. You know, I know the focus off if your child is very young is on them. Try and be aware of what's going on. But also, I remember my mother-in-law gave me some advice. Is there's a difference between taking a risk and hazards. And I think you've got to allow children at all ages, whatever's appropriate for their age, to take a few risks, but that doesn't mean putting them in the way of hazards. And I think there is a difference. Like I say, we can't wrap them up in cotton wool, but yeah, let your children explore the beach and a bit of the sea. That's a risk, but don't let them do it by themselves. That's a ridiculous hazard. You know, weigh up what's the difference, and a bit of risk taking is okay, but it's got to be calculated, and you've got to be aware of it as a parent.
So you talk about this intuition and this connection now. I just want to see how far that, you know, would you know if your children are in, you know, would something prick up on your radar to say, oh, I need to find the kids now, or I need to be aware, where are they at this moment? Is there kind of a little radar that pings into action?
Not something, I wouldn't say it's something when I'm not with them that I feel particularly. Perhaps some people do, but when I'm with them, for example, you know, a classic example that comes to mind is when we're at the playground. If I go to the playground with my mum, so the kid's grandma or nana, she'll get nervous about when they're at the top of the slide, for example, or when they were younger, she did. I didn't. You kind of know your own children and you know their capabilities really, really well. It was no reflection on my mum. I think most grandparents, that sort of one step removed, get nervous before the parents do. And it's because you become aware of your child's abilities and also their attitude to risk. You know, my eldest daughter was very cautious, still is actually. She's incredibly cautious as a child and wouldn't put herself out of her comfort zone. She wouldn't take much of a risk herself. So I know that I can leave her pretty much on things like play equipment, but I'm sure it expands out to other things. She would err on the side of caution. My youngest is a bit more of a whirlwind. So if anyone's going to take a risk, it would probably be her. So I treat them differently. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but just to sort of try and be aware of what your own children's attitude to risk is. And I can tell when I'm with them, I do have this feeling of, oh, this is about to happen. I can kind of sense it and stop it. And, I think most of the time that's right. When I'm not with them, no, not so much. They're at school right now. I'm not getting any feelings either way. I'm just sort of thinking they're in safe hands. I think that's the other important thing, is trusting. If they're out of your sight, do you trust the people that they're with? So obviously school's a great example of that. I talked earlier about sending, if they were to go abroad and stay with a family that we know, it's got to be someone that we as parents trust their parents. And then you've got to kind of hand over the reins a little bit. I think it wouldn't be fair if we asked our children to go into school and then we're questioning the teacher every 2 seconds about what they're doing. If you've got to decide, do you trust that teacher? Do you trust that school? Or do you trust the people who your children are with? If the answer is yes, then you've got to, trust the whole hog and kind of leave them to it.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And I think it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing for someone to imagine when you haven't got kids or when I haven't got them, how life is with them. But I think that you've given us a great insight, and I think it's certainly, I would view crying children on a plane differently now after our conversation.
Buy the parents a glass of wine, they need one.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, isn't it? You're with them all the time and it's difficult. And it's, we would, as someone in a restaurant or walking down the street, we see a snapshot of it. So it's certainly another world.
I think it's important to really point out as well, I've maybe painted a bit of a picture of how tough it can be. The flip side of that is your children help you see the world again. And that is incredible. As someone who's grown up, and we all become a little bit more jaded as we get older, and you kind of lose a bit of the magic of the world sometimes. Travel can really help with that, help reignite it, because you're experiencing new things again. But I think the amazing thing about having children is that they're seeing everything for the first time. And as their parent, that helps you see it through fresh eyes as well. So whether you're, again, going camping somewhere locally or visiting a city nearby or going to somewhere the other side of the world, traveling with children can be incredible, because when they find something amazing, you find it amazing again, and you've kind of forgotten. So that's the amazing side of traveling with children or holidays, or just having children, to be honest, in everyday life. So yeah. It's a good side.
I think that's absolutely, I completely, I think it's wonderful. You see them on the beach and wherever, and they're so interested in a couple of pebbles or a little rock pool they could spend the whole day. And I just think that's so fantastic, because it's lots of things that we'd walk past and wouldn't even think twice about. So no, I think that's a wonderful point to end as well, Emily. I think it's been great talking to you, and certainly, traveling as a family seems unbelievably rewarding, and the reliving your youth again is a fantastic point. So thank you ever so much for your time today, and thank you for chatting to us on Safer Travel Talk.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Safer Travel Talk was presented by Caroline's Rainbow Foundation, a travel safety charity created to help travellers explore the world in a safer environment.